attention please. A very beautiful morning to each and every individual over here. This is your host Sheikh Afifa, and I welcome all of you to the most anticipated Dubai 2024 conference. Can we have a big round of applause please, all of you? Thank you. Building on the incredible success of our past events, we are back in the vibrant city of Dubai for a 3-day tech extravaganza that promises to be even more engaging and enlightening. We are privileged to bring together a remarkable group of visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders from across the tech landscape. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Internet 2.0 conference. In this, I request everyone to please be seated, make yourself comfortable, and we'll be having a really amazing panel discussions, and all of them will be sharing their ideas, their knowledge, so it's going to be an unforgettable, amazing event. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't forget to connect with fellow attendees and share your moments and insights using our official event hashtag, which is Internet2Conf. So ladies and gentlemen, before we begin with our first panel discussion, I would like to ask you guys a question. I hope that all of you will be able to give me a positive response. Can you guys tell me, how are you guys feeling? Are you guys fine? Yes or no? Yes? What about the people at the back side? A very good morning. And I would say that it looks like really amazing to see you guys over here early this morning. So is everyone excited? Tell me yes or no? Shall we begin? Yes? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the topic for the panel discussion is the rise of AI-Augmented Creativity, redefining the role of humans in product design. And for the panel discussion, I would like to welcome Mr. Sanjeev Mishra. Yes, a round of applause for him, please, all of you. He is the founder and CEO of We Remember Technologies Private Limited. And our panelists are Osama bin Saleh Bukhari. Yes, okay, over here. Nice to see you. So, Mr. Osama bin Saleh Bukhari, he is the group CEO of Al Faraz International Group. And lastly, I would like to invite Dr. Ankur Narang. Yes, he is the AVP of Data Science Apparel Global. All of you please give a big round of applause for all these amazing gentlemen, and I would like to invite you at the panel discussion.
Good morning everyone. Welcome to this first panel session, first day, first thing in the morning. So we would be discussing on creativity aspects where AI has been impacting quite a bit, and you have heard many things happening. We'll just go in more details of it. How is AI happening and impacting product design, and what is the role that is changing in product design because of these things. So I'll start with the background intro session for our panelists here. So Mr. Sanjeev, if you want to give.
My name is Sanjeev Mishra. I have around 20 years of experience in technology. I spent 12 years in Morgan Stanley as a head of equity and fixed income software department in India, which was responsible for various Run the Bank and Change the Bank initiative globally. And 3 years back, I formed my own company named We Remember Technologies, where we are providing consultancy to various startups and a couple of initiatives being done in UK and India. And I also provide consultancy on HR, where we are helping startups to set up their processes and make sure it's an employee-friendly company. And on a passion side, the creativity side, I have interest to write songs and videos and short story. I released 6 Hindi songs and one recently English song, which was Such a God You Are. In that song, I could not afford actor, so I made a video using artificial intelligence. Yeah.
Thanks. Mr. Bukhari.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Osama bin Saleh Bukhari. I come from Saudi Arabia, as you can see. I'm the group CEO of Al Faris International Group. We are I would say, a medium-sized conglomerate, a small conglomerate. We're in multiple sectors. We're in the health sector, we're in the education sector, and the IT sector. For me, I started my career by education in the IT world, so I have a computer science degree. And then I joined the banking sector at a very young age. I started with only about 6 months of IT work in the banking sector, then I was sucked into the business side. And I think it was a blessing because it was something new at the time called cash management, which is known more as transaction banking today. And a lot of you would understand if you talk about which is your e-banking, your payments, your collection, all of that is called cash management to a bank. So I started that back in '96, so quite a while. And then I continued for over, again, 20 plus years in the banking sector. Then I decided to leave being paid and started my own company, which is mainly in the IT sector because the education is managed by my wife, Sahra Norzougi, and she's also participating in the education conference. So, we built, I would say, a nice business that is very much enriched and is very much in almost every single bank in Saudi Arabia, including the central bank, uses one or more of products and services. And we do a lot in terms of AI, and we do a lot of research in terms of AI. And there's a lot of boom in Saudi Arabia happening. Whether you hear the words of the city of Neom or others, which are completely smart cities, and they all will definitely use AI.
Thank you, Mr. Bukhari. So about my background, essentially across 29 years, I've been in the tech space, leading technology at various companies. I started in the Bay Area in US, basically for around 8 to 9 years, working in Sun Research Labs, got acquired by Oracle. We were building the fastest supercomputer at that point of time, early 2000s, when the internet.com boom was there. And that was essentially used for hardware acceleration. So we were giving like 1 million times faster performance over the typical Sun servers, the best at that point in the industry. Over the last 20 years, I've been in the AI space across IBM Research and many other companies. So I've been establishing the AI function in multiple verticals. It has been across roaming, mobile roaming with Mobilium, then Yatra, travel e-commerce, where I set up the first chatbot for travel e-commerce in India, bringing up a lot of the revenue use cases, bringing them hundreds of crores of ROI from reducing discounts and so forth. And went to Hike recently, last 3-4 years, where I was leading the AI charter for social and the gaming industry over in India. Over the last 3 years, I have kind of also started my own edtech startup called ByteLearn, where we have been looking at interactive maths teaching using AI. So we were like 85 to 90% accurate before ChatGPT came in 2022, and now with ChatGPT we are actually 99% or higher kind of accuracy on the whole of high school, pretty much middle school also included. So, and then I have a consulting startup based in India. Currently, my role at Apparel is essentially around setting up use cases for various generative AI kind of in the purview of that, AI for fashion design, which I'm going to talk about in this panel and so forth. So, looking forward to an interesting discussion here. So, let's start. So, Sanjeev, tell me, what has been your experience in using AI for product design? What kind of challenges and opportunities do you see in this space?
Yeah, so when we say product, for me, anything that you create is product, right? So I have seen multiple clients where they're trying to build something, and I see the difference between it was 5 years ago versus today, right? So today, the one difference which I see is the user, they have got the knowledge. So now they do experiment with, if you're going to the somebody to say, I want to build something. For example, there is site room GPT, right? So in the past, when you want to build your own home or flat, you do some website and put, I have one sofa and then some color you choose, right? Nowadays, when you go to any product designer, architect or somebody, you don't just talk, you give example, because we have a lot of tools in hand where you can be creative yourself and see this is what I want. In the past, it was very tough to explain what you want because it was in your mind. When you explain something, the other guy cannot understand and say, do you want this one, do you want that one? And the communication gap between the person who is wanting something versus the person who is building something, there's a difference. Now that gap has been reduced significantly. I myself, like I said, in the songs, I did not require a director or somebody, I did myself, right? Why? Because I'm empowered with the tools which are available in the market. This is one area which I think has significantly reduced the gap between the requirement side versus the implementation side.
Nice. You also want to talk about the creative side of music and video that you have been developing and working on. How has AI helped you over there?
Pardon me?
The audio generation on the passion side. I mean, you have more projects going on the audio and video generation.
Yeah, so there is. I'm exploring the things. Like I said, initially I started writing something 20 years ago. I could not implement for 16, 17 years. Now, once these tools are available, I myself able to do a lot of things. What I want, I can see on the video side. I can see on the picture side. Then I started exploring the editing option. Right. In the past, I want a title for my movie. I have to get some money spending to someone to generate the title. Now, if you go to Adobe Butterfly, right, Firefly, and there's similar thing somewhere, there's a website where it says this person does not exist, right? So that website, you have multiple options. This table does not exist, this room does not exist, this area does not exist, and you will create all those images which you feel like it's real, but actually those are not real. So I was working with a client who was a doctor in Mumbai, and I explained that this is possible, and he said, no, you are lying, right? And then they are 20 years behind. They are doing all the scanning, everything, blood report, everything manually. I said, why you are doing that thing? We are talking about 2022 and you are in like 1992. So people are not aware, and that's why I think these tooling are helping people, even who are laymen, to understand what is there, what are possibilities which you can build yourself, and you can become creative. Whoever is creative, probably they can explore the things and implement the things themselves.
Great, thank you. Mr. Bukhari, you have a great experience on the banking side. Now you're leading a global international company, and you also have experience in education. What are your thoughts on the AI for product design, creativity, and the role of humans?
Very interesting. I think I share a concern here with a lot of people. Yes, definitely AI is great and everything, but it's also, it can be disruptive, it can be counterproductive, and especially that it relies on data that is available, let's say, on the internet or anywhere else or everywhere, which means it can be skewed, it can be manipulated by the content creators. Meaning, if I like, let's say, Barcelona in football, and I keep on writing a lot of content about Barcelona, that they are the greatest, the best, then whether they are or not, the AI will pick that up and they will say, oh, Barcelona is the best. So this is my greatest problem with AI, and that's why we are extremely, extremely careful in the education sector, specifically, not to use AI just across the board, but it needs to be really, when we talk about generative AI, it becomes a little bit more, I would say, intelligent than just regular AI. But again, you need to make sure that the content that is created, like when you talk about ChatGPT, yes, we all like it and we are all happy. How do I do this and how do I do that? But then the answer is almost becoming a de facto. Is like yeah, it's absolutely true. No, it's just like Wikipedia. You know that any research that says I've used Wikipedia as a reference, out, because it's created by different people, different opinions. So it's not scientific. So this is my greatest problem with AI. At the same time, we're definitely working with it. Just like anything in this whole world, there's nothing that is absolute. Nothing is absolutely wrong or absolutely right or absolutely good or absolutely wrong. Just like the famous Chinese yin yang symbol. It's always a balance between white and black, male and female. All the two opposites. There's no purity in anything. So when we implement that, we have to be really careful on that. But when it comes to, let's say, on the banking sector, that is more apparent. I would say yes, in the financial sector, definitely. It helps, especially the monotonous, repetitive jobs that are even prone to human error. Like the operations, like when you do a payment at a branch, it really goes back to the payment department for them to process it, and although most of it is automated, but still it needs people to look at the different routings and stuff like that. That way we're able to automate and make it into AI, and becomes more intelligent, because actually it becomes more intelligent than the human, because we fed it all the information. So then it can make a call, whether this transaction is legitimate or not, whether it's a possibility of fraud or not, and that's where it really excels. And I think and that's where we need to draw the line between just simply using AI for everything. Because I mean, again, he talked about the fun factor, or being able to do that. Again, if you just look at it as something nice to do, yes, but then again, he's depending on a tool that is telling him this is the right way. But is it? I'm not sure. So it may not follow a standard. So this is my point on AI, honestly.
Thank you, Mr. Bukhari. That was fairly insightful and fairly detailed. So, so let me give a perspective on what AI can do for product design, and my personal experiences over there, and also in areas related where the design part exists in many other core operational parts of the business. Those verticals also I would cover. So on a product design level, essentially how we used to design products and how the whole cycle used to happen essentially was based on a set of product analysts, a set of product designers, you have, and then the product, maybe a CPO and then a product manager and stuff like that. So you have this full team that is working on designing products. It could be a B2C product, it could be a B2B product, and essentially you have to cover the various nuances of how the users would respond. You would look at what designs it should be, what should be the product flow, how should we stick together. You would do some iterations. If you're a startup, you would do in a very fast set of iterations. You are a large company, you would take kind of a somewhat of waterfall kind of an approach, but you still have some kind of agile cycles. But essentially, you would require a certain minimum time to be able to design a set of things, conceptualize what you have in mind. So what is happening is that earlier when you required a set of product designers to do that, now you have on the same Figma, you have generative AI capabilities like FigJam AI, and you have many other plugins with multiple other tools through which actually you can design those screens in a very fast fashion, because it will give you the design pretty much with a text kind of input. That's the text to image kind of capabilities that are available, and even you can feed images and text, and you can get improved images of whatever design of the screens that you want to have for your product. So the whole sequence of how your product looks like and what are the screens, that designing part has become much more faster, much more productive. And then even it will give you recommendations at a high level of how the flow should be. So if you go and if you even do that with a ChatGPT or GPT 4.0, right? Essentially, it's going to give you those kind of suggestions of how your product should look like, what is the overall product strategy. But even at a micro level, the product designer becomes much more productive. So now you can do those explorations much faster versus what you had to do that earlier. In fact, try that out in the market and keep iterating. Now you can do that with your in-house teams because you can actually do those designs much faster. So that is one aspect of where the whole actual UX design part becomes much more easier. Now, at a higher level, essentially when you are designing the product strategy, that is where again these tools can give you a good set of insights. Again, as Mr. Bukhari mentioned, you are the owner over there and you are the final creator and you have the ownership of delivering and seeing how your product performs. So that kind of mindset and that whole vision is what you bring to the table, and then you have a team which doesn't execute. So these tools are basically helping you to do these things faster and do a more strategic level thinking and also tactical level productivity aspects, both in terms of time, cost and productivity. These are the benefits which are directly coming to the table, and many companies have started doing that, and they are really great set of tools to leverage over there. The other part that it basically helps is that when you launch a product, once you have launched a product, essentially then you have lots of user feedback that would essentially come into it. You would start with a certain number of users, you would actually spend, let's say, a couple of months getting that feedback. You kind of figure out how to improve your funnels, what are the various product metrics. So in this whole cycle of understanding how your product is behaving and making it launch at a faster pace with higher product metrics and a better curve over the next few months, essentially there itself generative AI has a very big role. So essentially you collect a lot of user feedback which is structured, unstructured and so forth. It can summarize very easily. You actually have a lot of these product signals, the clickstream data, maybe the fraud that can creep in, maybe the actual funnels data and so forth. So in order to generate those visualizations and to be able to process that data and understand the data, that is where generative AI capabilities are fairly helpful. So you have these tools with a core capability of text to SQL where you can basically talk to data, and there are multiple companies and integrations that are happening inside Tableau, inside many other plugins that are coming in. So in that product cycle also, the second phase of the product life cycle in general, you will have a lot of these tools which will help you understand the things much better, which typically is very hard even for your core product team to go into that level of detail. Now with relatively smaller number of people at a much smaller amount of time, you can actually get a much more detailed thing. You can find the core issues in your product, you can find the long tail issues in your product, and you can make sure that you can actually design it so that it has the right direction of how it goes. And as the product essentially goes to the next phase, you essentially are looking at optimizing your funnels better. You want to have more detailed charts, you want to have the whole flow set up. So the whole coding that is required earlier, which used to take the engineering teams a whole amount of time, that whole cycle is now reduced, and you can actually have a much better view of the product. So these are, for any core product, these are the core things where generative AI immediately helps you to improve its design, improve its strategy and so forth. Essentially, as you go into the maturity phase of the product, which is kind of as the product goes into like millions of users and so forth, you have core product metrics and business metrics that become very important. In order to track those metrics, you have these visualization dashboards where generative AI can help. In order to massage those metrics, to kind of understand where the product is going, how the competition is behaving and so forth. So you can actually essentially use generative AI to make sure that you are able to change the core parts in your product so that it goes in the right direction in terms of your business metrics, whether in terms of experience for the users, whether in terms of it is large amount of fraud that has crept in, whether it is in terms of what particular product metrics that would be interesting. So along the full product cycle, including the design part, generative AI and the traditional AI or deep learning based core routines such as vision models, reinforcement learning models, it has a very good set of applications over there. So this is on a generic product design, which could be B2C, B2B, any vertical. This methodology helps, and that's why it is so powerful in terms of what it brings to the table, and also it impacts the way the humans interact with these things, because they now have to become much more adept at using these tools, understanding these tools, and fundamentally leveraging of how it makes them more competitive against other companies, right, as a group. On the other side of things, so this is one set of things that, based on my experience, I've seen how the companies have evolved and used these technologies. On the other side of things, on a very specific stuff, you have, for example, AI for fashion design. So in fashion design, what happens in particular is that there are two different kinds of products. One which can continue across the season, like a typical set of shoes and so forth. Other would be, premium fashion, super premium fashion, or even value fashion, where the trends have to keep changing over time. And now there is a trend of fast fashion where you really want, instead of these cycles of designing a new product, it comes to the market and then it gets launched, of these cycles of around 6 to 9 months. Now you want, there's a whole tendency in the market to compress it to at least less than half of this particular cycle time. So what is happening is that while you are looking at the same amount of traction for your products, you essentially are looking at totally new designs to come into the market, and you have the whole amount of social media data and other data that you want to process and understand the trends that have been going on, understand what kind of future trends that can basically evolve, and then also bring in your creativity and also bring in the fact what will actually be sellable in the market, right? So this it's a very important factor over there. When you need to combine all of that, you need to process huge amounts of data and bring that decision making on the table. In order to bring the decision making on the table, again, you need AI to be able to digest the data. You have multimodal foundation AI models and the typical text and image foundation models which can process the data, bring those insights, and essentially get you the trends and dashboards for you as a designer or as a design team to get those new products, for the company and for that particular brand and whatever the target that brand is. So that is one part of the story. The second part of the story is that once you have these insights, then essentially you basically want to design new variations. Now, as in the product design, as Sanjeev mentioned and as Mr. Bukhari mentioned, AI tools essentially help in that creativity part as well. In this particular use case, the creativity part basically comes across what is the new, apparel that I should design for essentially kids, for women, for men, and so forth. What kind of new accessories that you should design? What kind of new patterns can you bring in that? And considering the trends that you foresee in the future and how that will basically be able to sell, and how your past, keeping your brand kind of image over there, and essentially being able to make sure that it is kind of consistent but essentially still targeting and going further into new variety, and you want to generate a large amount of variety. So that is where these generative AI tools have come in, where you can take text as input, you can take your current designs, you can essentially feed in a particular set of designs that are there. You have tools like Midjourney, the new Black.ai, Adobe Firefly that Sanjeev mentioned, many other kind of new tools that have come up, where you basically have the concept in your mind. You can in fact draw a sketch, you can give a pose of the person, you can give some parameters of what kind of dress, and you can use technical terms, technical jargon of the fashion industry or that particular brand. So far it is not very peculiar to you, it is generally being used. It will generate something very good and very high quality as an output. You can generate any set of images from there, and you can select which ones are more interesting to you. Then you can essentially go over iterating on this particular cycle and make the outputs more refined so that it brings the thing very close to what you actually want. So that is the first part of conceptualizing the design in a whole fashion design process. Then you can actually essentially look at doing a 3D modeling of it. In the 3D modeling, basically, so there are two ways to go. I mean, once you can actually just use Adobe Illustrator, you can get the 2D designs as an output. This is how my cloth looks like. Essentially, you send it to the manufacturer, you get a piece sample, you see how it looks like. But that takes a gestation period of, let's say, a few weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, and so forth. If you want to optimize the thing, you essentially could make a 3D design, see how it looks like on a mannequin, see how it fits like people of different gaits, different nationalities, demographics, hairstyles, and so forth, and see how it really works out. So you can visualize the whole thing in software, right? Do that at a much faster kind of cycle times. And then finally, once you have converged with your teams, you can actually send it out for production. So that whole cycle time compression is an interesting use case that is being explored by various design houses. In addition to that, as your design matures and you want to expand to different variety of kind of fashion designs, you can actually use these tools to get a much better ROI for the whole of user metrics that you want to track. And again, the whole user information processing and how the various cells and your loyalty points and your loyalty growth that has happened over time, those can be input and those can be used to improve your product. So the other part that comes over here, especially in fashion design kind of industry, is basically personalization. So if you're looking at premium products, you could actually design it in a very personalized way, because it kind of can give you, basis the typical kind of occasion. Let's say you want to go for a specific party and you have a certain kind of occasion that you want to dress for, you have a certain set of likes and you have certain kind of special requirements for that party. You can give that as an input. It's going to give you suggestions based on the particular brands that you are interested in, not even the generic brands. So that could be fed in by the business who's providing this service through the cloud. And then essentially it gives you those kind of suggestions. Those can be tailored, from a user perspective, you can give those designs. From a company perspective, you can essentially design for those kind of segments. You can get that manufactured and you can have this kind of personalized set of outputs that could come across for a user or a set of users. So the personalization angle essentially gets seriously amplified with these technologies. It has been there all through for the last 15, 20 years or even more with the standard AI kind of techniques. So this kind of workflow essentially brings a whole new set of capabilities. It kind of enables fast fashion. It kind of makes this thing fairly interesting. So this is a whole angle that, these are two kind of generic product design angles, fashion design in particular. There are other verticals as well which are leveraging this. For example, manufacturing. So when you're looking at 3D manufacturing, then in order to kind of be able to design specific types of products which are used in parts, manufacturing parts and so forth, that could have applications in any kind of like large kind of infrastructure industries. That is where again generative AI can play a big role. In general, if you look at, if you even generalize this further, you have these models, which are, building new chemicals, new, which can be used, for example, getting water in the desert from thin air, essentially from the water vapor, converting that using specific compounds, which are a mixture of crystalline materials and so forth. So the whole design of those chemical compounds in this kind of application, or even for drugs, as you would have seen, there's a lot of problem of antibiotic resistance. So we will design those drugs. Those products itself essentially comes over there. So all the people in these different domains, as they are kind of leveraging their expertise and essentially moving towards now using the generative AI aspects to it. So again, the core part is something that comes from these experts, but from the toolings perspective, it is raised the whole value proposition to the next level. So the whole involvement of humans essentially has kind of changed to the next level, and the whole industry is evolving to a higher value proposition, and we are able to address use cases because of the generative AI capabilities which were never even thought of. And there's so many new use cases that are coming. So basically from this point onwards, essentially, I would like Sanjeev for you to comment on generative AI in particular. What specific in general that you see generative AI has kind of brought in terms of opportunities, and also in terms of challenges that you have seen so far in your...
Yeah. So let's understand generative AI. There are multiple algorithms for audience sake to understand the word properly. And one is called transformer model, where ChatGPT is based on. It's part of encoder-decoder idea, where things get encoded, and then there's a large set data prepared and then decoded. There's another one which is called GAN, or like image creation and video creation and all, where you don't believe or the generated image is close to reality. It's more kind of it generates, and there is a one part which identifies whether it's right or wrong. That is called discriminator, right? So it keep on generating unless discriminator is going to fail to identify it is real or fake. So that's the two concept that we build all this generative AI thing on. Now coming to the point for designing and all, the creativity area, right? What we require is for creativity or any product design, be it any domain, we require one thing, which is ideation. You require some idea, which cannot be done by machine, right? Second part is prototyping. You create something, how would it look like before implementing the actual product. And then implementation come, and at the end you do the optimization. These are 4 different steps for all the things. Now where a generative AI can help on creativity, no, it cannot help on creativity. Ideation is your idea, it's your brain, right? Second thing is prototyping. Yes, these are various tools where you can quickly do prototyping and have, instead of, like let's say 10 years ago, you had 10 different model or 10 different design, now you can have 1,000 different designs. And you choose what you want. You have a lot of options to choose, and that's where the implementation comes. Once you choose, and then optimization part where you narrow down further which design is better, you use those model to identify the optimization part, right? Like I said, encoder or maybe generator, and then second part which is discriminating the things. Right? These are the 2 concepts where optimization can happen. That until unless you are really sure what you want, then you cannot go ahead and approve that thing. Now, how it is helping the designer and architect on those things on the website, like you mentioned, there are a lot of tools where you can generate Figma things. You just put something on paper, scan that thing, and then generate various websites. It's not like one website. You can have 20 different websites generated. You can choose the color, you can choose the font, you can choose the style. But one thing is very important is your psychology understanding of that local area, right? You're building website for whom? You're building product for whom? You're doing the net banking for which people, right? That psychology machine will not understand. Unless you have millions of data, probably 10 years ahead, that may be the case. But as of now, that is not possible. Second thing is, whenever we are building something, right, one is called social intelligence, right? Whenever you are somewhere in, let's say, UK, US, somewhere, you need to understand different people have different requirements. So designing may not, the product is not going to work for everybody. Those parts again is your thought. So this is the designer or the architect or the person who has to think about social intelligence, understand the local market, understand the trend, and understand the variety of different people. It's not just you pick one thing and that is going to work. Again, I'll take the example of website where you choose a color and you think it is going to work. No, that's where social knowledge and other things come in handy. So you have to understand the empathy of people, you need to understand what you're building, what design is right for everybody, and accordingly choose your solution.
Great, thanks Sanjeev. That was a good overview of how generative AI and what kind of models are helping. So Mr. Bukhari, from your side, what specific business angle that you see generative AI is bringing along with the creativity aspects that it helps in?
Well, as we know, AI is not new. The concept of AI, does anyone know how far does AI go back for? I mean, any idea? When did AI start? 7 years?
50s. And the 50s started.
Exactly. So, if it started in the 1950s, by, of course, Alan Turing, right? And that's going to be part of my speech when I, next. But why did it only happen now, in the past maybe 7 years or so, that we see the difference, or we see the acceleration? It's all about computing power. We did not have the computing power back then for it to be able to I mean, the ideas are there. It's exactly like, what was mentioned. That, you have the ideas, you have everything, and then just with the computing power, we are able to do a lot more. And that takes me to the answer, which is what industries can use that, and how it can help different industries. I'd like to take the movie industry again as a very good example. Everyone knows, of course, James Cameron, from the movie The Titanic, and then later on Avatar. You know that the idea of Avatar, before it was made, it was in his mind 20 years before I was actually able to make the movie. Why is that? Again, computing power. Because what he wanted is something that was not just possible whatsoever, to do a multi-dimensional computer imaging infused with realistic images and real people acting at the same time. That was not impossible. There was like a few attempts, like, when we see like movies like Who Framed Roger Rabbit or others, which is just like 2D and just very simple. You can see it's not even like realistic. But if you see Avatar, is so realistic. You get immersed into the movie because of the technology, and that's where I believe we're only touching the surface today, and we just talked about Gen AI and other stuff. This is only the beginning. It's going to just evolve more and more and more. But one thing is, we could see that AI can be used to simply bridge the time, I would say, it takes us to do something, like when you do code or something. Like we could see the evolution of low code, no code platforms today. That use of a lot of, by the way, AI tools or AI engines inside, because for now, because if you think about the number of programmers that we need to fulfill all the programming of the world, we need at least 50 times number of people to be able to fulfill everything from now until I would say in the next 15-20 years. So this is not possible. So that's why we started thinking, okay, then why don't I let the computer do the human job, which is repetitive. Again, we're never replacing the humans, because as again it was said by my excellent colleagues, the creation, the ideas are always us. But then the computer just helps us to fine-tune them, to make all these automations. So instead of spending hours and hours and hours on writing code, no, all I need to do is just do a bit of logic, feed that into one of the platforms, and it will give me a foolproof code, which is ready to go. But then when I see the result, I make the call and said, yeah, this is exactly what I want or not, or no, I need to tweak this, I need to tweak that. And I see this is where honestly the AI evolution is going to help us in the near future, but then it's going to be something really different. Because again, if you think about it, when AI first started, it's like something like when IBM created Deep Blue, and it was able to play chess against Garry Kasparov, which was the greatest the chess player of all times, and it was able to beat Garry Kasparov. Because what happened there, it was the first time for a computer is able to understand the movements of others and do an analysis and do a little bit of prediction and be able to do that. But it was all about, combinations and permutations. Then we saw the next evolution, which is recent now, which is like self-driving cars. So it's not just about AI that looks at another person or a machine and interacts with it. No, it needs to interact and realize everything around it. So when I'm doing self-driving, there's other cars, there's stop signs, there's traffic signs, there are other factors, there's weather. So all of that goes into the AI, and that's the next generation. And that's where we stand today. But then we believe that there's so much evolution that's going to happen. But it's just one thing that cannot be translated now, which is human emotions. Human emotions still cannot be translated from analog to digital. That means an emotion cannot be put into ones and zeros, because us ourselves, we don't even know how our emotions work. Because sometimes you feel so passionate about something, sometimes you see the same thing again, you say, okay. Then again you say it, you see it again, you say. So it's really, that is the part where, like when you see even like in movies again, like Terminator and others, it's like once the machine becomes self-aware that the machine or the program knows that it exists, then that's a totally different story. And I honestly hope that we don't reach that, because that's really, going into something really, really different.
Thanks, Mr. Bukhari. That was fairly interesting. And that lays a great context on how the generative AI is transforming things, but we as humans have only become more powerful. We just have to be aware and use the technology in the right direction. So actually on the technology side, that brings an interesting question which I'll put to the audience and you guys. Do you guys know which is the NVIDIA GPU which is now touted as the fastest? Any guesses on the NVIDIA GPU, which is the core, which is becoming the core part of the next level supercomputer they are going to build and run all these deep learning models and ChatGPT, LLM type models over there, large language models. Any guesses? Okay, any companies do you know which are there in the hardware space other than NVIDIA? Okay, not a problem. So let me pitch here. So NVIDIA has become a multi-trillion-dollar company pretty much because of they had got an early lead onto the GPUs. So in the early years, basically they were doing only graphics, which was essentially rendering what you see as graphics for games at early point of time. That's basically, let's say, late 90s. Over time, essentially they went and made it as GPUs, general purpose GPUs. That is where they started using for general purpose compute utilization. So wherever the code can run in parallel, what we call data parallel fashion, they were able to get speed ups which were way times faster than a typical CPU. And that's where companies like Intel and AMD started moving towards, hey, we should also have a data parallel architecture versus a typical control oriented parallel threads kind of architecture. So on the parallel processing, high performance computing side, you have a data parallel side and you have a control thread parallelism over there where you can pipeline things and make things faster with a higher throughput and lower latency. So essentially NVIDIA had that early start for many years. They had these general purpose GPUs, GPUs as we used to call it. And then this started into K8s which had 8 GB, T4s which are even now used, the lowest cost GPU, the 16 gigabytes. And now there are these, over time they have evolved, they have A100s, A80s which have around 80 GB of memory, where you can fit these large language models which are of the size of 12 billion, the Llama 12 billion model, the Mistral model from the company in France, or the other models that are coming up from multiple startups which are building open source, specifically Meta. So these things, so that's why they became the de facto standard, and we had pretty much the race or the war for GPUs, everyone just running to get these GPUs. But over time, many companies have realized that this has become very valuable. So as NVIDIA has now moved into H100, this is the GPU that I was referring to, and they are building a supercomputer basis that. Other companies, even Google has TPUs, Apple is also building, Microsoft is also building. In fact, they have early versions of their hardware. And there's a company called Cerebra Systems, essentially, which is building very efficient kind of architectures which are tailored more and more to actual deep learning kernels. So the fundamental core modules or execution that happens in a GPU, that is where they have designed the hardware which does exactly that functionality in the hardware. And because on top of it, you are not running general purpose kind of computing codes, like a sorting algorithm or something like that. You're learning only these deep learning algorithms where you have to compute the gradients, propagate them back, essentially then update the weights and so forth. So a typical training, fine tuning that is required in a large language model, and it requires a huge amount of memory, so it's optimized for this memory usage, reads, writes over there on this architecture. So now they have, Cerebral Systems has specific hardware. In fact, they are getting funded by the UAE government, and that is where they are building a Cerebras-based supercomputer, AI supercomputer, which will essentially compete with the NVIDIA H100-based supercomputers. So as you see, as Mr. Bukhari rightly mentioned, the computing revolution is the core kind of necessity or the enabler for all these, algorithms to start kind of churning such a high value add that we see across so many verticals. So when you train a large language model, you feed in a huge amounts of data, basically tens of trillions of tokens. You obviously clean the data, get it from all the sources on the internet, obviously make sure you don't have copyright issues or minimize those, and essentially feed that into these training cycles. And then you have a huge kind of GPU cluster, and now pretty much would be a Cerebras or any other compute cluster. Right now it is pretty much a GPU cluster, and then you take a large computing power, basically of the order of what a petascale or an exascale supercomputer would require, pretty much a tera and petascale supercomputer, and that's why you're able to train such powerful models, because they realized over time that for training these large language models like GPT-4, so GPT-4 itself would have like 1 trillion parameters. Other ones like GPT-3 would have still some 100 billions, and Llama is able to compress it down to 12 billion and so forth. But what they realized that when you feed in this large amount of data, you have larger training cycles pretty much powered by this compute cycle, then you get this behavior. And this is the behavior of the pre-trained models, which around 10-15 years back, there used to be very limited pre-training. It won't be so powerful. So that is the genesis of how these LLMs came into being. Obviously, it has taken even OpenAI these 4 to 6 years to get over there, right, with the announcement of GPT-4, and now they are looking at GPT-5, which hopefully should come within the next 6 months. So that has been the evolution and how the computing power has enabled these kind of capabilities. So I would like to basically conclude this session with any final thoughts from Sanjeev and Mr. Bukhari. So please go in any order.
Yeah. So I'll give one example. So once you come to this ballroom and if there is only one seat available, which seat you would choose? You choose that seat, right? But when you are the first person to enter, you have so many options. You sit somewhere and then you see, okay, there is another seat available in front, I'll move to the seat. So you keep on upgrading yourself. Similarly, when you have designed a lot of tools, generate so many options. The thing is, you have to choose the right option. It maybe sometimes you get so many options that you get confused. That is one very important thing, right? Not everything what is generated through machine is right. You have to have that intelligence to identify what is right, what is wrong. And these tools should be used for identifying what you want, rather than just taking as a solution, right? The human brain has to be there, their activity has to be there to identify what is the right solution for my customer or somebody, right? That part you cannot remove from the whole plan. So that is my thought, that whenever we design any product, we have to make sure that what option we choose is right, and we just don't get confused by all the options, because what machine is generating may not be right. You have heard about hallucination and all those fake deep and everything. So that is the message from my side, where you have to use your brain to be creative, one side, and second thing is choose the right option once you have the solution.
Thanks.
I would say beautifully said, and I totally concur on that. But I'll tell you something about human nature and human behavior. We are always excited when it's something new. I mean, take an example. If you hear about a new restaurant that opened, you just want to go and try it, right? It may be the most horrible experience that you might have, right? And it might be good, but we just rush into something new. And you will see a restaurant that just has huge queues, and you call them and say, sorry, we're busy for the next 1 month, and 6 months later, you see then it goes back to the norm, and a few people are there, and you say, oh, what happened? I thought that was the place that happened. And then another place happens, and then that happens, So we are always changing, we're always evolving. And so is technology and everything around us. So nothing is stagnant, nothing is stationary. I think the only constant is change.
Yeah, thanks. My esteemed fellow members on this panel gave very good feedback. I would like to kind of basically again re-emphasize similar points. Essentially, in summarizing, generative AI is not going to kind of, it's kind of better for humanity. So far as you are flowing along with it and you are learning and you know how to be able to use it, it's all for the betterment of everyone. And as we kind of heard of some statistics where the actual requirement for the use cases and the need for humans is only going to increase, it's much higher. So being jobless actually should be observed as kind of transformation of how the economies are going to work, transformation of what are the new value use cases that are going to happen and how we are going to work, rather than thinking on the side of it, which is more comes from the fear, which is very natural to appreciate that. The other side essentially is that, the change is constant. My version of that is, heavy amount of change is constant. So, I mean, the pace of change has only increased. These robots, these, whatever kind of, not sentient so far, kind of beings, or whatever, I don't call them beings, they're kind of basically machines or algorithms that we have put in place. They're going to just make things change faster. So we have to just learn to adapt. So the psychological part of it has to adapt to it. That is extremely important over here. So thanks everyone. I would like to open the floor to questions from the audience over here. Any questions, any thoughts, any feedback, most welcome. Yeah, please.
So, like, I want to see how that AI is going to enter the telecom. Because, those competition within, like, we are in a pool of companies which are competing with STC, Saudi, Dubai, and this kind of stuff. So, for us, quality and the price is very important. I want to see how the AI can enter the telecom.
Sure. So yeah, I think so the interesting part of telecom, you guys sit on huge amounts of data, right? You have the call data, the call record data. You have the customer interaction data from all different demographics, nationalities, languages, and so forth. So, and then you also have the data from the OTT software that is essentially available across what kind of programs the people watch, what kind of movies the people watch, what kind of commerce happens, and so forth. And then you have a lot of data on the network performance. So with 5G, 6G, and so forth, you have a lot of data on how the video is performing, what is the experience of the people from delay and throughput perspective at the internet, home routers, at the, for example, the video experience from the base stations. So because of this data, there is a natural spawn of so many use cases on the B2C side and the network infrastructure on the B2B side as well. On the B2C side, essentially, what kind of experience can you give to the customers with interesting chatbot technology, powered by ChatGPT, essentially large language models, across text, across speech, and then understanding speech and so forth. You can have a kind of very fine-grained kind of chatbots that could help in customer interactions, understanding their issues, customer service, product discovery, and so forth. That the whole cycle of understanding the customer, getting the feedback, being more productive, enabling your call centers to be much more productive, enabling, let's say an email-based response cycles, all powered by chatbots and obviously moderated by humans at the back for each of the use cases, can make this customer service so more productive. So, given millions of calls at a large company like an Airtel or a T-Mobile and so forth in US would kind of receive, how best can you serve the customers and make their experience to the next level? That is a competitive differentiation right over there. And that's where you would get more adoption from the customers, and that would directly impact your top lines and bottom lines. So that this comes from the customer experience perspective. In the same umbrella of things, designing better products, figuring out more use cases, the patterns of customers, what are the new tools and what kind of app designs that you could bring out that you could differentiate versus the other competitors in terms of the OTT space, right? So these are the B2C set of high-level use cases. Looking at the call experience and so forth, that by itself you can do an analysis over there and do a much more understanding of what are the core issues that are hurting your customers, even without the customer asking you. So you can drive proactive customer experience improvement over there. On the network side, essentially, as I mentioned, the video caching at base stations, for example, you have to serve now. The video is the core content, and that is fundamentally increasing from the customer standpoint of what data actually gets consumed from the users. Over there, therefore the video experience is extremely important, and still we don't have for a mobile a proper video experience as you could have seen even in a typical kind of economy. So over there, essentially how you use AI to be able to cache those things properly, understanding the pattern that the users come, the uncertainty at which people can be in a base station and transform, move across the base stations, what kind of caching architecture which is distributed, that you feed the videos and you are able to serve them with the right throughput and light latency for the customer. Therefore, the experience on the user device actually is fairly good. And then the whole network design, right? Because as you are moving from, many companies are going to full fiber optic, we are moving from, we are transforming to 5G, now moving to 6G. They have core AI in there to improve the whole network efficiency and performance over there, right at the core network layer. And where do you put the base stations? How do you expand across large geographies, for example, Saudi or US or UK and so forth? The whole design of the network is where the AI-based insights of what has been the pattern of calls in the past, how the network typically behaves, how it will evolve in the future. Those are the things that you could use on the network infrastructure side of it. So I see a humongous role that it has, and companies worldwide in the telecom space, the big giants, Airtel, Deutsche Telekom, T-Mobiles, and the AT&Ts and so forth, they are already taking deep strides in that space. I hope that answers your question.
Just to add one thing, time is up, I don't know, but the thing is, any industry, be it telecom, be it software, be it any industry, the key thing is, whatever human are doing the useless work, right, I'll call it that way, or repetitive work, you can move it to the AI and you focus, be it design or anything, you focus on the real problem solving, right? Creating document, where is the patient document, where is the telecom document, data is where, it is not our responsibility. Machine will do that thing, collect the data and identify the problem. You or any industry can focus on the solution part using all these tools. So we save a lot of time, be it any industry.
Thanks, Ajit. Any other questions? Yeah, please.
So you talked a lot about the innovation in training new elements. Thank you for that, about NVIDIA, what they are doing. But see, everybody is coming with a lot of elements. Everybody is creating an element. Now the real problem has become, how do you avoid the hallucination and the bias, because that that human feedback is still required, right? So what kind of new innovation is happening in that direction? Because that is becoming the bottleneck.
Yes, that's a great question. So I think one direction over there is also to make the LLMs more efficient. So we have small language models that have come up, and folks from Microsoft and other folks are focusing on that as well. So what happens is that you are able to focus the LLMs or the whole architecture of language models or foundational language models to a particular use case or a set of use cases instead of a very generic thing which is GPT-4, for example, or even Llama, 12 billion and all that. So the moment you make it more focused, you don't necessarily reduce the actual power of it, you actually make it more focused to the use case. That also tries to tendency to reduce hallucination, but that is not the answer to your question. So that is one direction. The core part is that people are developing utilities to handle hallucinations, bias, and so forth. In particular, it requires these set of tools which act as checks. So when you fine-tune your LLM, obviously you are using an open source LLM. Let's say you take a small language model or even a large language model. You start with Llama, you start with Mixtel, and so forth. But as you fine-tune and you see the performance, the first thing you need essentially is a very strong testing on the hallucination side of it. So that you have to be very, very careful. Bias is a very important problem. Again, that can be a very big issue in the whole LLM. So there are tools which actually measure that formally, number one. Number two, you can use, you have to use very detailed testing, and you can again generate those use cases using these large language models, right? So you can make that thing productive. It is not a purely manual, and therefore it reduces your cycle time for delivering the product. Number three, essentially, is that you can also produce specific checks when you fine-tune your model. So when you fine-tune your model, make sure you are not introducing that bias. And you're obviously trying, when you're creating the annotation sets, you know what the performance is and so forth. Other thing you can do is you can couple these LLMs with other models where you can actually validate more automatically that these hallucinations are reduced to zero. So for example, in a very recent article on Microsoft 365 introduction as Copilot, Copilot in Microsoft 365, sorry. In typical kind of output text generation, it says summarization of meeting, it says Bob presented such and such, but Bob did not exist in that meeting, right? So these kinds of things are occurring, and the people who are the core, technologists here, they are facing the same problem, and so it's a very, very real problem. But if it is tested properly, then and you can actually first have an output check over there. It can maybe increase the latency, but you can optimize for that. But fundamentally on the training and fine tuning side of it, you can make the process and test it properly so that it minimizes to close to like 0.00001 kind of a percent. So there are ways people are doing it, and that's how it is, getting used in all these different verticals by doing very focused checks over there. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, so I'll add my comments and I'll let my panelists also add in. So essentially, we have seen definitely in US, things are the fastest growing. US and EU have been the fastest kind of areas and companies where people are actually deploying these solutions. These pretty much use as the easier, I would say easier use cases, which are chatbots, which have been prevalent. So you kind of enhance them with this power. A lot of their other verticals also in some of the core use cases, as I mentioned, where people are actually deploying, for example, fashion design, product design, creative designs, right? Figma has Gen AI, Adobe has Adobe Illustrator. So a lot of these kind of successful companies are integrating in their core stack and bringing it as a capability. It also, remember that it gives the onus of the user to make sure that hallucination and bias are managed. Right? They give their own quality to a certain level, and then people who are actually using it in their product have to manage. In some cases, it is just increasing productivity. You don't give the full automation to AI or the control to AI, in which case it's very peaceful. Your designers are happy, your people are happy, and so forth. In other cases, like chatbots, where you give full, relatively larger ownership to the chatbot, you need to have strong monitoring, as we were just discussing on hallucination and so forth. But even here in GCC, you see adoption starting to happen. Even in India, you have lots of China definitely is way ahead of the game. You see robotics as a key industry that is growing, and there a lot of this core technology is just helping in bits in humongous amount of parts and of how a robot would work in multiple use cases, not just the warfare part, but also in productive part, helping senior citizens, typical codes and stuff like that. So there's a wide adoption across countries, I would say. Yeah, please, any feedback from?
Just to add, in my opinion, it is not about the country, it is more about the structure of the company. Right? Small companies, startup, they are going very fast on those things, every country. And big companies, I think in my opinion, what I've seen, it takes years to decide to go to adopt something new, and then a couple of years to implement something. Big company, that's a difference in my opinion.
I'm sorry, just to touch on your point, and by the way, I don't disagree with what they said, all what is said. It's all about computational power. And I'll tell you, that's why the US is ahead, because of computational power, like NVIDIA and others, GPUs, because we are not allowed to use GPUs. The US does not export GPUs. So that's what really caps us. Not because we don't have the ideas, or it's not about a country or a company or anything. It's really about capabilities. It's just like, give me a strong tank and I'll be able to go, fight. But then somebody else comes, hits it with a plane. Then that becomes more superior. And that's why the US is really ahead. It's because of the computational power. I don't believe, honestly, because minds are great, whether it's India, China, Guatemala, or Saudi Arabia, or any place, we're all the same. We're all humans, and we all think, and we're all equal. I truly believe we're all equal. It's all about the computational power. Honestly, we are all ready. Again, it's all about the computation power and the availability of data sets, as you said. So data is just available. I mean, you just mentioned, about telecoms. Telecoms have huge amount of data. The medical sector, huge amount of data. The media sector, the huge amount of data. So if we just do that, and it needs to be institutionalized, by the way, like in Saudi Arabia, we have a whole institution just on AI, about artificial intelligence. It's a government funded, it's a government body that has a lot of funding that they need to work on that. But the only thing that is stopping them from really doing advancements is because of the GPU capabilities. Because whatever we see today, by the way, including ChatGPT and others, by the way, it's mediocre. It's nothing. It's really, you know, like what technology is ahead of us is way beyond what we see.
Yeah, I think the data, basically preparation cycles have gone down, and you know, once you have the vision of these use cases to enable and in this way, you have the data, you just have to prepare it in the right way, get the pipelines ready, and then you have these algorithms to digest. So companies which have been in the space, they've already processed it, they can leverage to the next level. Companies which have not gone which have not gone so much, I mean, on some of the verticals, they actually can go that far and, you know, get those pipelines and start using it. So those latencies have gone down actually. So okay. So yeah, thank you so much. I think it was a great discussion. Thanks for the questions, and hopefully you enjoyed as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.